The air in New York City in the early 1970s was thick with more than just the usual summer humidity. It was charged with a cultural shift. The polished studio system glamour of old Hollywood was cracking, making way for something grittier, more real, and intensely personal. It was in this ferment that a young, ambitious director named Francis Ford Coppola began assembling the pieces for a film that would become far more than anyone anticipated: The Godfather. Coppola, himself a maverick fighting the establishment, saw his vision clearly. For the role of Michael Corleone, the war hero who would be dragged into the family's dark heart, he didn't want a traditional star. He wanted an actor who could convey a volcano of emotion beneath a placid surface. He found him in Al Pacino, a little-known theater actor from the Bronx. To the Paramount studio executives, this was madness. They complained Pacino was too short, too unknown, and too quiet. But Coppola held his ground, seeing in Al's dark, intense eyes and simmering stillness the perfect soul for Michael. The search for Kay Adams was equally deliberate. Kay was the moral compass, the innocent world Michael could never fully inhabit, the light that would make his darkness tragic. Coppola needed an actress who wasn't just playing innocence, but who possessed a genuine, unforced quality. He found it in Diane Keaton, a young woman who had recently left the stage for the uncertainty of film. She was not a classic beauty by Hollywood's then rigid standards, but something far more compelling. She was authentic. Her energy was vibrant and slightly offbeat, her smile quick and genuine, and she carried an intelligence that was both charming and formidable. Their first meeting was arranged not on a soundstage, but in a small, shadowy bar, a location chosen to foster intimacy for a screen test. The atmosphere was thick with awkwardness. Both were young, both were nervous, and both were inherently private people. Al, in particular, seemed to retreat into himself. Diane would later recall the scene with vivid clarity. He was sitting in a booth, almost swallowed by the dim light, a faint, persistent cloud of cigarette smoke swirling around him like a personal shroud. He barely spoke. There were no attempts at charm, no easy Hollywood pleasantries. He simply was. And in that profound silence, something unexpected happened. Instead of being put off, Diane was intrigued. His stillness wasn't empty. It was full. It communicated a depth and a seriousness that felt more real than any polished introduction ever could. For his part, Al was struck by Diane's lack of pretense. She didn't try to fill the silence with nervous chatter. She met his quiet with her own attentive presence. When they began the scene, the magic that Coppola had gambled on ignited. The scripted lines were just words, but the subtext that flowed between them was electric. Diane's Kay was not a passive ingenue. She was a bright, observant woman drawn to the complexity she sensed in Michael. Al's Michael, in turn, allowed a vulnerability to flicker in his gaze when he looked at her, a glimpse of the man he might have been. Coppola, watching the footage, knew instantly his gamble had paid off. He wasn't just seeing two actors. He was witnessing the birth of a fundamental cinematic pairing. Their connection was natural, raw, and deeply emotional, exactly what his epic, family-driven story needed to feel human. The first day of principal photography on The Godfather was the wedding of Connie Corleone, a sprawling, sun-drenched sequence that served as the perfect introduction to this world and to their on-screen relationship. Amidst the chaos of extras, the music, and the celebration, the camera found them. Diane, in a simple, light-colored dress, stood out like a beacon of normalcy. Al, in his military uniform, was stiff and reserved, yet his eyes continually found her in the crowd. In those unscripted moments between takes, the dynamic from the bar continued. They were two young artists, suddenly at the center of a massive production, sharing quiet, uncertain smiles, finding a sliver of mutual understanding in the whirlwind. The filming was a long, intense, 8-month journey. They spent countless hours together, not just in front of the camera, but in the interstitial spaces of filmmaking, in makeup trailers, on the edges of the set waiting for lighting, and in quiet corners during lunch breaks. A foundation was being built, brick by brick, not on grand declarations, but on shared looks, mutual respect for each other's craft, and the unique, isolating experience of being part of something they both sensed was becoming monumental. When the film wrapped and was released in the spring of 1972, it didn't just become a hit, it reshaped cinema. Al Pacino was catapulted to stardom as the new archetype of the brooding anti-hero, while Diane Keaton won the hearts of a generation with her graceful and heartfelt performance. The world celebrated them as stars, but the true, invisible bond had already been forged in the silence of a dimly lit bar and the chaotic sunshine of a fictional wedding, a connection that would define both their lives for the next 50 years. The success of The Godfather was a quake that sent Al and Diane rocketing in the same direction, upward, but on trajectories that were already beginning to subtly diverge. In the wake of the film's triumph, their professional lives exploded with a force that tested the quiet, private bond formed on set. Al plunged into the gritty, intense world of Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon, his performance a raw nerve of desperation and vulnerability. Diane, meanwhile, was cast by Woody Allen in Annie Hall. The role was not just a part, it was a revelation. Her portrayal of Annie was so effortlessly charming, so brimming with a witty, neurotic, and utterly modern intelligence that it didn't feel like acting at all. When she won the Academy Award for it, she was transformed from a respected actress into a full-blown cultural icon. Her personal style, the baggy trousers, the ties, the hats, became a symbol of a new kind of womanhood, intellectual, independent, and defiantly herself. It was during this period of dizzying ascent that their off-screen relationship quietly bloomed into a real, though fiercely guarded, romance. They were a study in contrast that fascinated the public and defined their private dynamic. Diane was effervescent and open, her laughter a frequent sound on sets and in interviews. Al was introspective, shrouded in a quiet intensity that could feel impenetrable. They found solace in their differences. Friends recalled them preferring quiet dinners to glittering parties, talking for hours about acting, art, and life. Diane was often a supportive presence in the shadows of Al's world. Waiting backstage during his theater rehearsals, a silent witness to his process. Yet, the very forces that made them so magnetic together also began to pull them apart. Fame was a double-edged sword. Diane learned to navigate its glare with a graceful candor, speaking openly about her work and her feelings. Al, however, recoiled from it. The spotlight that Diane could disarm with a self-deprecating joke seemed to burn him, driving him deeper into his own private shell. The distance was more than geographical. It was a fundamental difference in how they inhabited their celebrity. Diane thrived in Los Angeles, embracing a creative community, while Al remained a creature of New York, his life centered on the stage and a close-knit circle. Their love was real, but it was becoming a delicate thing, strained by the immense silent pressure of two brilliant stars burning in separate, increasingly distant skies. The call for The Godfather Part 3 arrived nearly 2 decades after their story began, a summons that felt like destiny intervening. The project promised a final, proper conclusion to the Corleone saga, and for Al and Diane, it became an unexpected epilogue to their own. When they reunited on set in 1989, the easy warmth of their youth had been tempered by time, and the quiet understanding of lives lived apart. The playful banter was gone, replaced by a profound, almost unspoken respect. They were professionals, of course slipping back into the skins of Michael and Kay with an ease that belied the years. But the air between them was different now, charged with the weight of what had been and what could never be. The emotional core of the film was the final, devastating encounter between their characters. In the scene, an older, weary Michael begs Kay to ensure their son remains out of the family business. It was a plea for redemption, for a final connection to the last shred of his soul. As the cameras rolled, something remarkable happened. The dialogue became secondary. The real conversation happened in their eyes. In Al's gaze, there was a lifetime of regret and a silent apology. In Diane's, there was a deep, enduring sorrow, a love that had never fully extinguished, but was now finally being laid to rest. The director, Francis Ford Coppola, later said the entire crew fell into a hushed reverence. They weren't watching a performance, but witnessing a raw, real farewell. The power of that moment was rooted in a painful, off-screen truth. During the production, Al was navigating a new chapter in his personal life, having recently become a father with another partner. For Diane, this news was a quiet, final blow. It solidified the reality that the future she had once hoped for with him would never materialize. In her memoirs, she would later articulate what she had long felt, but never stated so plainly. After years of loving a man who was afraid of being tied down, she had been the one to finally say she could wait no longer. The final scene for Michael and Kay was, in essence, their own. It was not a moment of rekindled romance, but a graceful and heartbreaking acceptance of its end. They were saying goodbye to the dream itself. When the film wrapped, their parting was final in a way it had never been before. There were no promises to stay in close touch, no plans for the next meeting. They walked away from each other having given a perfect, poignant performance that served as the definitive closing of their chapter, a silent acknowledgement that some roads, once diverged, are not meant to meet again. In the wake of their final cinematic goodbye, Diane and Al embarked on the separate journeys of self-discovery their relationship had long hinted at. For Diane, the closure of that chapter unlocked a profound desire for a different kind of love, one built on permanence and purpose. Stepping away from the intense, emotionally draining roles of her youth, she consciously sought a quieter, more grounded life. This new path culminated in her decision to adopt 2 children, a daughter, Dexter, and later, a son, Duke. Motherhood became her central role, not as a replacement for her career, but as its most fulfilling extension. It provided a warmth and stability that the transient world of film sets never could, giving her a deep, personal anchor. Her career evolved in tandem. She returned to the screen not as a ingenue or a tragic lover, but as a mature woman of wit, strength, and grace in films like Something's Gotta Give and The Family Stone. She became a beloved elder stateswoman of cinema, her performances reflecting the calm confidence and hard-won wisdom of a woman who had built the life she truly wanted. Al's path, in stark contrast, remained firmly rooted in the world that had defined him from the start, his art. The 1990s marked a spectacular renaissance in his career, a period of unparalleled critical acclaim. His long-overdue Academy Award for Scent of a Woman was not just a prize, but a vindication. He continued to command the screen with magnetic, powerful performances in films like Heat and The Insider, solidifying his status as one of the greatest actors of his generation. Yet while his professional life roared, his private world remained as ever guarded. He too became a father, raising 3 children with his partners. But unlike Diane, he never sought the structure of traditional marriage or a public-facing family life. He seemed to find his fulfillment within the intense private process of his craft, balancing his legendary status with the solitary focus of an artist. His public persona was still one of a man who held the world at arm's length, a figure of immense power who preferred the shadows to the spotlight. Where Diane had built a vibrant, noisy, loving home, Al had cultivated a quieter, more internal existence, his legacy secure in the canon of his work, his personal peace found away from the public eye. Their lives, once so intertwined, now ran on parallel tracks of contentment, each having found a version of happiness that perfectly suited their fundamentally different souls. The public narrative of their epic connection seemed to have reached its natural, quiet conclusion. They were 2 legends, respected and beloved, their shared history a cherished piece of Hollywood lore. Then, 2 events converged to give their story one final poignant chapter. The first was the release of Al Pacino's autobiography, Sonny Boy. In its pages, the famously private actor did something extraordinary. He opened up. He wrote not just of his career triumphs and failures, but of the internal struggles and the quiet emptiness that sometimes lingered even at the peak of success. And within these reflections, one name was mentioned with a tenderness reserved for no other: Diane Keaton. He revealed the hidden moments that defined their bond. He recounted how, after his career was nearly shattered by the catastrophic failure of Revolution, it was Diane who had steadfastly believed in him. She was the one who encouraged him to take the role in Sea of Love, a film that single-handedly revived his confidence and his standing in the industry. He shared intimate memories, like a simple, private evening after the premiere of The Godfather, a moment of unvarnished connection that had stayed with him for a lifetime. His words painted a portrait of her not just as a former love, but as his most significant supporter, a singular soul he had never forgotten. Then, just a year later, the second event unfolded. Diane Keaton passed away peacefully in California. The world mourned the loss of an icon, but for those who had read Al's book, his written words now resonated with a profound and heartbreaking new meaning. Passages that had been read as nostalgic recollections were suddenly transformed into a eulogy. His confession that she was one of a kind, and his detailed memories of her faith in him were no longer just reflections. They were his ultimate silent farewell. The book became his final message, the confession he could never make in person, delivered to the world just in time for it to serve as his tribute. In the wake of her death, fans and readers returned to those pages, sharing them as the emotional capstone to a 50-year story. There would be no grand public statement from Al Pacino. His grief, like his love, remained a private matter. But in Sonny Boy, he had given the world, and in a way given Diane, the truth they had all been waiting to hear. It was a final testament to a bond that not even time, distance, or death could truly sever. A love story whose last word was not spoken, but forever etched in ink.